start off the program, we're going to ask everyone Blumey to come up to Zagna Parverter. Ayesha for standing behind this whole organization.
As a Hakdoma. So Bruchim Aboyim, Ala Choshev Mechanchim. We're standing in a very special Maimad Umatziv, be'emes a special Maimad Umatziv. We all know that the Rebishter had gesagt, the Rebishter wanted to give the Torah b'shas Yeshiotu Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. Over then, Hoyu Chalukim, they were arguing, the Rebishter gesagt, ich kenn nicht. Bis sie gewähnt, vayichen sham Yisrael, ki ish echad b'lev echad, so Matan Torah was postponed to Shavuos. So the Achdus and Kli, the Achdus and Shalom is be'emesen, the Iker Keli to Matan Torah. Zusammen damit, the Alter Rebbe says that if 10 Yidden get together, Kibalti mit Aboisai, even Kishamaloi Medabrim Divrei Torah, is a Malach would be Nisraf, if we're only going over. So we can only see for ourselves what a special Maimad Umatziv we are in now, and a Maimad Umatziv Shalom V'Achdus. I just want to tell over a short story that I saw in Nishlang Tzirik. Was that erzählt Mendel Zilberstein from Montreal. He said that it was years ago and he was making a Hanukkah event in Brussels, and even though he was coming from a certain organization, but he collaborated with the Anash from there in Brussels, and his uncle was going back to the Rebbe, so he asked his uncle to be medaveach, to tell the Rebbe, Reb Shmuel Meir Zilberstein, his uncle, and to tell the Rebbe about the event and that he collaborated with the Anash. His uncle came back. His uncle came back on Tuesday. On Shabbos, he received an express mail from the Rebbe, where the Rebbe acknowledged the event, and the Rebbe said that he had special nachas ruach from the fact that he did achdus with the Anash over there. So he was very happy that his uncle gave over the letter so fast. He came from Brussels to New York and gave it over before Shabbos, and he already got back an express letter from the Rebbe on Shabbos. His uncle came back. He thanked his uncle for doing such a quick job and giving it over to the Rebbe so quick. His uncle became pale and said, "I'm very sorry, but I forgot to give him the letter." So he says, now it was my turn to become pale, and I realized that the Rebbe, it was often a Ruach HaKodesh, that the Rebbe already sent me the letter back before even receiving the letter, and writing the great Nachas Ruach that he had from the Anash that came together, Ba'achtus, together with him. So he said that was a learning lesson for me for my entire life, to realize how much the Rebbe appreciates the Achdus and how much Nachas Ruach it gives to the Rebbe. So no question that this is an amazing thing before Matan Torah. I just want to say that I felt that it's unique and a specialty that when Mechanchim come together ba'achdus, and that is, which we find something aside by Vayichan Shem Yisrael and aside connected to Hakhel, that the Rebbe is madgish. The Rebbe points out that while achdus is such a great koyach, and it even has a koyach of, like it says by the Dera Floga, that kol asher yozmu lasos leibotzim mehem, even if it's against the Rebbe, the achdus can ufton, nothing else can accomplish. But nevertheless, since we are looking to be makabel Torah b'simchu b'pnimius, so if we want to take it b'pnimius, anon nafshik service Yehovis, so the achdus is Vayichan Shem Yisrael neged ahor, connected to Torah, when it's through Torah and it's with Torah. So that's something special and unique to Mechanchim that are always doing that, imparting Torah to the Doira Tzoyer, and that's also what Hakhel is. Hakhel es Liyireh es Hashem, and like I saw in a letter from the Rebbe, that the Rebbe writes that B'Doir Yosim Hazeh, it's so important that Yiras Hashem is Kedemes L'Chochma, and the Rebbe writes that Amalamed L'Talmidim L'Chol Rosh is Lenatzel Kol Es Damnus, to utilize every single opportunity, V'Gam Litzur Es Damnus, and to create opportunities, L'Hachte Yiras Shemayim V'Avas Hashem B'Talmidov. So this is something that Mechanchim are always doing. So it fits in so well with this in Vayichet Shem Yisrael Negedor and Hakhel Liyiras Hashem. And as the Rebbe says, that this is the way that we come to be Mekabel Satire B'Simchu B'Pnimius. So will man anwünschen alle Mechanchim Shem Matzliach mit seine Talmidim and Poil sein in a way of B'Simchu B'Pnimius and see brachas in their own lives in B'Kol HaNyona B'Bon HaChayim V'Zein Revicha V'Kulam Revicha, and the main thing is Galus Melech HaMashiach Tekef Miyad Mamish. I want to now call up a known individual who is Oisek Bechinuch in Oifen von Menal Roshi of Oli Teira, Harav HaKoyen, Harav Menachem Mendel Blau. And I also want to say a special L'chaim and Onwünschen Harav Blau of Zanya Meledes, Zayin Ashnas Hatzloche, Vegashmius, Beruchnius, and alle Brachis. Tomit Kol Hayomim.
L'chaim. Tonight is Mazali Goiver, so taka anwünschen als bei alle Mechanchim soll sein alle brachas. In other words, the Mechanchim, I don't want to jump the gun ahead of to some degree, the emissar Revim to the Beneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu is the Mechanchim. In other words, so the Mechanchim that are not just, they're even maybe the art of Kabbalah, and maybe they're even together, the Hechsta together of Arvos, they take it straight, Shanosa V'nosan V'lokach. The Mechanchim, that they're be'etzem behind the Kiyum of Beneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu, sollen alle haben, Ba'oifen Goli, Toiv Hanira V'anigla, Bone Chayim Mezoini, Ubekulam Revicha, and like the Rebbe would quote from the Friedrich Rebbe that Mechanchim, or Bechlam Vesen, the Eibusher bleibt nicht kein Balchoiv, and Mechanchim is Malachta Meleches Shemayim, but befrat by the Eibusher is Mida Keneged Mida. So Mechanach git sich up mit Benoi Shal Malach Malchi Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Benoi Yechidoi, so the Eibusher pays back in everything, Ubefrat in Yonim von Kinder, Nachas von Kinder, Gesund bei Kinder, Brachis mit Kinder, Geld zu zahlen, to raise the kids, alle gute Sachen, soll sein bei Toiv Hanire Vanigla L'chaim. So the Medrash of Beneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu, we're all familiar with it. And just the Chazer Ibris, so to speak, how did the conversation go? So the Eibishter understood that sometimes we're quick and we overpromise and we underdeliver. So he wanted Arvos, right? We say Nasa v'nishma, but do we mean it? And is there going to be a Kiyum? So he wanted Arvos. So the Yidden were thinking, what type of Arvos does the Eibishter want? So the first thought was, Aviseinu Arevim Ba'adeinu. So the Eibishter wasn't happy, didn't accept it. So they offered higher. You know what? As the Aviseinu is nicht genug. Nevienu, the Neviim, the Rashi Yisrael, the Siyador, we'll put it on the Hechstem. Euch nicht gut. So then the Yidden went the opposite. So they said, fine, so Beneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu. And that was the Arvos that sat by the Eibishter. In other words, the Eibishter was Mekabel. So we have the way the Medrash lives by us in a Pashut Oifen, In other words, that if there's if we're going to give Torah to children, and children are going to be involved in Torah, there's going to be a kiyum. A lot of people understand this medrash. Bepashtus is part of the nekuda of bringing the kids to Aseres Hadibris. In other words, this is besides reliving the Maimed of Har Sinai, which was everyone, and there's the nekuda. This is the Ariv. I'm being mekabel the Torah. Where's my Ariv? This is the Ariv. Chassidus helps us understand that everything exists in its pashtustik eifin, but then everything also exists inside us. And I think more than just Chassidus and the Rebbe's Torah, you have very often how the Rebbe helped us look at things instead of compartmentalizing and say, this is this person, Aviseinu is my father, Baneinu is my child. There's the nekuda. There's the nekuda over here. So, a person is made up, a person is a structure. We're all structures. We have different parts, and the parts coming together and operating in unison is what creates a person. The Adam, which the Chassidus calls the Koimach HaShlema. Bichlalos, the many parts, are divided. There's the lower parts of the person, which is the Raglayim. There's the highest parts of the person, which is the Reish. And then there's higher than the Reish. Higher than the Reish. Keser. In Avodas Hashem, what does that mean? You have the way I can serve the Eibishter, mitzat Kabbalah soil, which is like the feet. There isn't a lot of thought. It's a motor skill. It's a function, mitut, Kabbalah soil. You have the way a person can serve the Eibishter in Seichel. And you have the way a person can serve the Eibishter, Shleimus HaSeichel, or even higher than Seichel. The intuition of a Yid, the Nefesh, the Atzmus, it's not Hakhel from Seichel. You have in a person's lifetime. In other words, now instead of looking physically in the structure of a person, let's look in the timeline of a person. We have our younger years, which in our younger years, what's the Iker over there? Sraglayim. To develop fine motor skills, regular motor skills. Seichel, it begins to develop, the cognitive development. As a child goes over, you have an halacha, what a child is shaykh to once he reaches 6 years, what a child is shaykh to by bar mitzvah, what a child is shaykh to ben esrim, he's able to be noisev and noisev ben chseyaviv, what a person, what an adult is shaykh to ben arbayim. So there's stages. The younger years are like the raglayim, the middle years and to esrim is seichel, and then there's the person that reaches even higher than seichel. So to some degree we can understand the medrash when the Eibishter is asking us, you're committed. In which level? In other words, we want everything. But where's the starting point? Our relationship with Torah. So the first answer that a person thinks, fine, Torah is hi chachmaschem ubinaschem leini amim chachmasay ritzayni shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu aviseinu arevim ba'adeinu seichel. We're connected to this. We're going to study this. We're going to unpack it. We're going to understand it. Eibishter says no. So we can look higher. The way that Rebbe explains what's mitzvahs betelis lasad lave. It's not betelis kipshutei. It's that a person can be so connected and elevated to a place that he feels it. In other words, natirlich ertutis. Nachecher von seichel al derech nevius. Intuitively we see it, we feel it. But by the Eibishter says, where's the starting point? Where's the arvus that I can rely on? Baneinu arevim ba'adeinu. The starting point of a Yid to Torah is the relationship that's l'mayla me'aseichel, but not because of nevius, but mitzat Kabbalah soil. It's not dependent on anything. I'm committed because I'm committed. So, in a tzir, A child resembles the Kabbalah soil. And again, but b'chayenu apratim, what's the Beneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu? That we're committed to Torah with Kabbalah soil, we're committed to Torah with our Seichel, and we're committed to Torah with everything. But the aside to everything is Kabbalah soil. To some degree, to add from another angle, so you have the Arvus. We mentioned you have every Lubavitcher is familiar with Alter Rebbe's Mechiras Chametz, Art of Kabbalah. So even a child in Cheder that didn't learn the Sugi and Baba Basra knows what Art of Kabbalah is. That Art of Kabbalah is that he's not just a Kabbalah if the Loive is going to default, but that the Malve can go directly to this. It's a higher level of a commitment that he can be first instead of second. He's first. Which level, in other words, sometimes, I don't know, Seital der Chatzachos, sometimes we think Baneinu Arevim Ba'adeinu, as the Pshat is, we're out of the picture. Torah's by the kids. Alain, no problem. Talk to the kids. It's all about the kids. The kids should learn. For ourselves, we patter ourselves. So, Kipashut, we understand that nicht azay is the Pshat. The Pshat is the opposite. That we're committed, in other words, we're being, the Eibishter didn't give the Torah to the children. The Eibishter gave us the Torah with our commitment that we're going to be mekabel the Torah and teach it to the children. You can't teach the children Torah if we're not living it, if we're not breathing it. If it doesn't exist by us and strong, it's going to be limited how effective we can give that over. Another Nakuda, just to talk maybe from an angle of, it comes up, and maybe Lachreina comes up more. The world, and maybe us as Mechanchim, we grapple with the question of expectations versus acceptance. So before we explain what, in other words, what I mean is that sometimes we place a disproportionate load on the Talmud. Maybe as a result of whatever we wanted from ourselves, instead of demanding it from ourselves, we go to the Talmud. Or sometimes, because we demand so much from ourselves, we have these high expectations. So some people counter that and say, no. Today is an era where there's no expectations. If you want Kiyum HaTorah by children, acceptance. Embrace. Embrace a child for wherever he is. More and more people went away from, as a result of this interpretation, away from giving tests, because tests is a way of setting an expectation. I set an expectation, I expect you to know it. Who said you have to know it? Right? It became hein velav shavin etzloi. The Yidden, machlokes, if they said al hein va'alav lav, or the hein, right? The hein velav. So it's like, to some degree, I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but to some degree, the way you usually understand how these things develop and how they live by different mechanchim is a lot of times we come at something and we overdrive it to an extreme. And when we overdrive something to an extreme, we hurt ourselves or we hurt the children in the process.
So how do we undo it? So we go in overdrive in the opposite direction. So in other words, perhaps as a result of certain times of the method in chinuch becoming so rigorous, so demanding, such high expectations, such high bars that are set, so we feel it's destroying. You want our children to thrive? Just love them. Just embrace them. Just smile at them. A child's reading. He's reading with mistakes. So what? He's reading, right? He's proud. He's comfortable reading. Don't correct him. However he reads, he's good the way he is. I'm not in a position to be machriya on this question. The only thing that I can suggest in this nikuda, in the way we place, in the way we approach our children, in the way we articulate this arvos, not just by Matan Torah, but throughout the year, I think the emes lives in the middle. The emes is in the middle. In other words, the Rebbe spoke just the Arega Lachas Kitzer Achi Nimrotz. It's a loaded question, and I don't have the answer to it. But Kitzer Achi Nimrotz, you see from the Rebbe, you find both extremes. Not both extremes, both Nikudis, and very strong each one. To the Rebbe, when the Rebbe especially dealt with certain children with challenges, one of the strong emphasis for a child was, if there isn't an expectation, and there isn't a belief that the child is capable for more, the child will not grow. So the Rebbe spoke about this l'mashu with special children. Sometimes we give a label. So we give a label, it's like, okay, now I can accept them. That is what it is. They're limited. Now, there's a belief in a person. When you really believe in a person, what results is a healthy expectation. That healthy expectation is what helps the child grow into a healthy young adult. That's where an expectation builds a person. When the expectation is unrealistic, or the expectation is not driven by my belief in the child, but it's projecting my expectation what I want to fix the child. I decided this is the standard that every child has to be by. So it's frustrating if I painted a standard and he's not meeting my standard. He's not meeting the standard visikum tois. So when we want to fix someone and we want to affix them to a standard, that's when we destroy them. And that's the expectation that doesn't build a person, but it destroys. And over there is where legitimately embrace, smile, take him for who he is, chanech lena'al pi darkoi, and then gam ki yasken lo yasser mimenu. So l'chaim, we should be matzliach in our avodah. It's melaches shamayim, but it's not easy avodah. It's avodah rabbas hachrayis, and the Eibusher should help us that shalei nevish, v'leni kolim, v'leni kosher, leilam v'ad l'chaim.
Grace and Yeshakayach, Rabbi Blau, and the Varim Meverter. Again, Baruch Habayim for all those that came in the middle. I'd like to call upon another Manal in Crown Heights, Rabbi Simpson, Manal of Lubavitch Shiva, Crown Street. It's Kubzagan of Perverter.
I would say, Poischin bichvoid achsanya, aber es ist schon gewähnt der Psyche. However, I still believe that it's important for us to acknowledge the wonderful efforts of Rabbi Avram in arranging today's Farbrengen. For arranging the Farbrengen of the past and the Mirza Hashem of the future, and also for the assistance that he arranges for the Yomim Tovim to be able to enjoy the Yom Tov the way the Yom Tov was meant to be enjoyed. So, Rabbi Avram, Ayasher Keach, I think today you outdid yourself. I walked in, I asked you, Avur de Chosun und Kala, und die Mishnah sagt doch, als bei jem Chasunose, Zumaten Teire. Nu, hast du Tage zugetroffen, Baruch Hashem. You know, in Lubavitch, fakt me sagen, as Shavuos is Chag HaMatzis. Chag HaMatzis, the Matz is doch der Meire Tzedek. We have a Rav here with us from Eretz Yisrael. Kommen again in Lubavitch. Lubavitch, fakt me kommen af Shavuos. The other Yomim Tovim, Pesach is doch Haribui Halachas. So a Rav cannot leave his Kehillah. He has to be there to answer questions. Sukkot is Echedah Kama V'Kama Halachas. Es kommt zu gehen, Shavuos, ein Tag, 2 Tage, es ist ein Yom Tov, kann man kommen in Lubavitch und dort verbringen and to spend the Yom Tov together with the Rebbe. Mela fragt man anrufen, Shavuos, Chag HaMatzes. Fragt sagen, that the Tzemach Tzedek's Tisch, gewinnt ein Nigla-Tisch. Also hat der Rebbe gesagt, der Tzemach Tzedek's Tisch auf Shavuos, gewinnt ein Nigla-Tisch. The Rabbonim who came were mefalpel with the Tzemach Tzedek, Shailus and Shavuos, by Negeya to Minyanim of Nigla. Das gewinnt ein Nigla-Tisch. Yesh Leimer, und öfter mehr wie Yesh Leimer, kann man sagen, dass Benoisef durch Chag HaMatzes, kann man sagen, dass Shavuos ist Chag HaMechanchim. Es ist Chag HaMelamdim. Es ist unser Yom Tov. It's our Yom Tov, it's our celebration. Die Gemara sagt, als Rabbi Yosef hat gesagt, als Ilav Hayem de Kagorim, if not for this day of Shavuos, is Kame Yosef ike Beshuka. Der Shuk hat Asach Yosefs. So der Yosef der Schuster, so der Yosef der Tabach, so der Yosef der Hakhel, der Holzhacker, so der Asach Yosefs. Sehr feine Jiden, chassidische Jiden. Sagt der Rabbi Yosef in die Gemara, as Hayom de Kagorim, this day was goyim, wie Rashi sagt, als durch Limit HaTeira ist Venisroi Mamti. Ich bin der Heuben geworden. A treffach Hecher. Man liegt etwas in Hechere in Yonim. Man lernt allein. We learn ourselves. We are Mechanch Talmidim. We learn with our Talmidim. And this is the Hisreimemus that we as Mechanchim have, and we maintain, and we need to feel and experience. As wir sein in a Tefach Hecher von den Yonim Arziim, von dem Shuk, was Chotsch afile that the Shuk is necessary, aber afal pikein, haben wir bekommen a Schus, we got the Schus, to be the Melamdim and to be the extension of the Melamid Teira Liyami Yisrael. In Chumash Bereishis gefindt man noch a Yosef, sie gewinnt Yosef HaTzadik. And Yosef HaTzadik, his Indian was that in Mitzrayim, what did he do? By Hakhel Yosef was Mechalkel, his father, and also the brothers, Lechem Lefi Hatov. This is what Yosef did. Yosef had gesehen that everyone should have whatever they need. Ad kedei kach as he given der Lechem Lefi Hatov. B'meila is yesh leimer that each and every one of us represents the Yosef. Because we are mechalkel the lechem lefi hatov, the lechun lachmu belachmi, the limud haTorah, the lechem haTorah. We are the ones who are mechalkel that lechem to our talmidim, to the tinekins, to the bachrim, to those whom we are mechanech, and we share our yediyas haTorah with them to see to it that they're going to be lamdonim, yirei shamayim, chsidim, yirei shamayim, and lamdonim. And this is was es steht in Tehillim, as der sie gewend der Edus be Yehosef Somei, that Yosef's name takes on der Eibishter's name. Sie dort der Hei von dem Eibishter's Namen ist reingelegt geworden in Yosef. Because Yosef became a shutef with the Melamed Teira Liyami Yisrael. And each one of us becomes a shutef and expresses the union of the Rebishter being the Melamed Teira Liyami Yisrael. And like the Rebbe says, Leikol Adam Zeichel Hazeh, it is a gewaltige Schus, Vayeden Einem, for each and every one of us, that we are able to be the ones was fühlen sich der Heuben, that we are able to spend our days and weeks and months and years and our life and our koiches and our efforts to see to it as melernt mit Kinder, men as mechanich Kinder, And we bring up a der that we can say the Ur Gedulim Shegidalnu. It's a gewaltige schus that we have. We also know, as it wird doch gebracht, as the Rambam sagt doch, as Loi Shevet Levi Bilvad, but anyone was gitzach up mit Limud HaTeira und gitzach up mit Mechanchim sein, andere Jiden und andere Kinder, wird rechet as Shevet Levi, that is Mereimim, der Heuben von die andere Shvotim, as it is expressed in our Aveda in Chinuch. And each and every one of us is here because Azei Vilmen min Hashamayim. The Gemara talks about a Reish Gargusa. The Gemara talks about someone whose job is to make sure that the water is divided properly amongst the various fields. And it's a Reish Gargusa. It's a very menial job. Nicht choshev job. Afal Pikein sagt die Gemara, as der Reish Gargusa is men a memanelei min Shemaya. In Himmel hat man ausgerufen, that Ploini ben Ploini is going to be a Reish Gargusa. Hein Kosh came the Kal V'chemer. When we talk about Mechanchim, and we talk about Melamdim, who are the expression of the Rebishter, and we take Torah and we give it to our Talmidim. So Chazicher as min Shamayim mimanalei, as each and every one of us hat me wegen uns getracht und hat machlit gewen, as it wollt gewen a gute Sach, that we should be a Melam, that we should be a Mechanech, and we should be involved in Chinuch to see to it that our Talmidim get whatever they receive, whatever they need. And this needs to create within all of us a Gehobenkeit, a Hisroinimus, a Stolzkeit, that we feel and we know and we believe that we are different. Different in a good way, nicht in a geivedike way. Aber man darf doch wissen der eigene Meiles, man darf doch wissen, wer wir seinen. Und nicht ist nicht gut. They tell a story of an Avrech, a younger man who once came to his Rebbe. Given a Chosheverid Rebbe, a Chochem, a Chosheverid. He came to his Rebbe and the Rebbe asked him, Wustiste, what do you do? Hat angefangen, begamgem sein. Der Rebbe ist doch gewinn a Chochem, hat gesehen, he saw, als schämt sich mit was tut. Gewinn am Alam mit Teneikes. Hat ihm der Rebbe gesagt, what you do, I don't know. Aber bei mir ist barur, als am Alam mit Torsten nicht sein. Because if you are not able to say mit der Stolzkeit, as ich bin am Alam mit Teneikes shal bis Rabon, that I am teaching children, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Und das ist unser Schus, and that comes with an achrayus. In Mitzvah Hashem on Friday, we're going to find ourselves in the shul, and the highlight of Shavuos is the Aseres Adibris. We bring our children to the shul, and we all are there experiencing Maimed Har Sinai. In essence, every day we have the kids in our classrooms. It's a certain gather of Maimed Har Sinai. We're taking Torah the way it was said by the Eibishter, and we're giving it over to the children. This is the introduction to the Aseres HaDibris. So there's the Kasha HaYedua, was it the Leimer? Leimer meant that it's being said to someone who didn't hear. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, Leimer, tell it to those who didn't hear it. Bei Maimed Har Sinai sind doch gewähnt alle Jiden. Es wohl gefällt ein Jid, wo Tere nicht gegeben geworden. Und nicht nur die Jiden begriffen, nur ich die Neshamis, das hilft Koladeres. Und was ist Leimer? Der alte Rebbe, in Teira Eir, in the beginning of Yisroi, in Maimer B'Chedesh Ashlishi, gives the biur al pi Chassidus, what's the union of Leimer? Yesh loimer al derech hadrush, and you can take it for whatever it's worth. Yesh loimer, at the Indian fun, bei Daber Elikim, es kol hadvarim ha'ela leimer, kem verstehen, if we first understand a little bit more the scene of Matan Torah, what actually took place at Matan Torah. And the Medrash says that Matan Torah, when the Yidden were there receiving the Torah, it was like children, teenagers, who found themselves in a Beis Sefer. Vayisu mehar Hashem, sagen Chazal, sie seien entlaufen von dem Haar, as if wie a Tinoik, when the bell rings at 4 o'clock, leift men aruis. Das ist gewähnt Vayisu mehar Hashem. So the setting of the Maimed Har Sinai, ich gewähnt a Yeshiva, sie gewähnt a Cheder, und sie gewähnt der Greiser Hamalam Teira Liyami Yisrael, who gave Torah to the Eden. Therefore, we need to say that there is definitely a hero in the Vaidaber Elikim es kol hadvorim ha'elam mit Yaseres HaDibris for the Melam de Mechet. It's a cheder. It's a yeshiva mit a cheder. Is yesh leime b'derech efsher. As der leimer geht es auf die Melamdim. Ihr seid die Leimers. We are the Leimers. We are the ones who then need to give it over. Mit darf es voneinander breklen. Mit darf es geben, mit darf Mechanchim sein, lefi hataf. Der Eibishter hat doch geredet, es kol hadvarim ha'ele. Aseres hadibris, kol hateire kula. Kommen sie gehen die Melamdim, die Shluchim von dem Eibishten, and now it's our job to be Mechalkel, the Lechem HaTorah, and to give it to each and every child. Und mit was fängt sich es an? Anoichi. How do we start teaching children? Kometz Alefo. We begin by teaching the children Oisiyis HaTorah mit the Nekudas. And we teach Lefi HaMeseira. Kometz Alefo. And we say, why do we have to teach the Kometz Alefo? Rabbi Levi Goldstein's book, Sefer, Chaim Levi, Yashikayach. Chaim Levi Sefer, verwost lernt man mit den Kindern Kometz Alefo, wie die Messiah ist? Weil das ist mechuber, it's connected to the Kometz Alefo von Anochi Hashem Elikecha. Is als man gefindt sich im Cheder, fängt man an mit Anochi Hashem Elikecha, mit dem Kometz Alefo. Und als hat der Eibishter angefangen zu lernen mit den Jiden. Mit Kometz Alefo. Aber Anochi hat noch Abschat. Die Gemara sagt, dass Anochi ist Loshen Nutrikun. Ano Nafshi Ksovis Yehovis. Der Eibishter hat sich hereingeschrieben und herein übergegeben, sich allein in Torah. So when we Melamdim are taking the job of the Eibishter and we are perpetuating his Melamdus, his teaching, darf doch bei uns sein, der Ano Nafshi Ksovis Yehovis. Als wir dürfen lernen mit den Kindern mit Herz und mit Nefesh, kedei als sie sollen fühlen die Teierkeit von Torah, that they should feel what Torah is, und sie soll können durchnehmen, weil es ist Dvorim hayetzim in halev, es nechnosim el halev. Also sie darf man lernen mit Kindern. Onechi ano nafshi ksovis Yehovis. Onechi Hashem Elikecha. The Yalkut Shimoni says, Hashem Elikecha, Loshen Yochid, ich bin der Eier Gott, Hashem Elikecha. The Yalkut Shimoni says that everyone who was there at Har Sinai said that the Eibishter is medaber imi. Der Eibishter redt mit mir, Elikecha. Jeder Engel hat gefühlt, dass der Melamed Teira redt mit ihm. Und wenn wir lernen mit Kindern, when we learn with children, und sie dort der no nafshi ksovis Yehovis, we don't miss and we don't forget about any Talmud that's in the class. So that men fühlt zu, der Hashem Elikecha zu jedem Kind. Als jeder Kind soll fühlen, als redt zu mir, he's talking to me. He means me. And when we have this element of chinuch, where we feel ourselves that we are the melamdei Torah, and we are the extension of Hamelamed Torah liyame Yisrael, demos werter hasher heitzisicha miyeretz Mitzrayim. Kids have their challenges. Sie dort der Mitzrayim, sie dort der Meitzer und Gvul, was jeder Kind hat. But when the child feels as there is medaber in me, he's reaching him. So der Kol Hashem b'koyach, says the Yalkut. It's not Kol Hashem b'koychoi, it's b'koyach. Lifi koyach shol kol echod v'yechod. So da ktanim, so da zkenim, so da bachurim, sagt the Medrash, and we reach each one on their level. Demos fühlt der Kind, als meint mir, und demos ist mehr matzliach. Soll der Eibishter helfen, that we should be matzliach in unser heiliger Aveda that we have, we soll es tun mit Simcha. The bracha that we give each other is Kabbalas HaSimcha, Kabbalas HaTeira besimcha u bepnimiyus. When we are mekabel Teira besimcha u bepnimiyus, können es übergeben besimcha u bepnimiyus. And the most important thing is, auf zu uns lernenden Kinder, als sollen wissen, als Matan Teira hat aufgetan, als ihr seid am Amleches Kehanim Vigei Kodesh. Children need to feel special, then they will act special, und wir wird haben für sie emesse chsidische Nachas, und wir soll sicher sein zu der Teira Chadosha Me'iti Tetzei.
Oy
Before we move on to the next speaker, you know that wegen die drei Lavdavkas, das sagen nach Siddische Meisters, Lavdavka mit der Shabbos und Lavdavka wegen der Baal Shem Tov und Lavdavka für Parnassus, das ist allemal Schule für alle gute Sachen. So a Meise was Ashkacha Pratis, I just read a Meise from the Friedrich Rebbe, there is an interessante Meise, that Shaykh is Versaimer, Shaykh to Malamda Bisla, the Avraham Avinu. Shana Meise, I'll try to read it as close as possible for the inside. Nothing go wrong with that. Meise geht das so. In Polotsk ist given a Chassid, a Kremer, a Yisrael. Ist gekommen gefahren zum Samach Tzedek. Ist given a Pashte Yid. Einmal ist gekommen zu Lubavitch, beim Samach Tzedek, Parshas Vayera. Hat gehört am Meimer, Chassidus von Rebbe, als Avraham Avinu ist given a Nadiv Begufei, B'Moinei und B'Nafshei. Der Rebbe Samach Tzedek hat gebracht der Meimer Apartis, B'Shem Sefer Abayr, Amber bietet sich Chesed von Ekash Baruch Hu Chulu, als bei Yam Mei, als vorher Avraham Avinu ist auf der Welt, hat nicht gemacht zu tun auf der Welt. Hat der Rebbe Moisef gewinnen, als Avraham Avinu sein Dik Dalamata, hat Machlif gewinnen mit seinem Gemilas Chassade Begashmis, die Sfiras der Chesed Atzilus. Was von Mele ist Muvan, als Avraham ist gewinnen Hecher von Bittes der Chesed Atzilus. Wenn Eib Chesed Atzilus wollte gewinnen Lamata, wollte das sich nicht gekannt Anton in Gashmis. Und Avraham Avinu hat sich Mamshech gewinnen in Gashmis. Ist das mit Sadmalas und Shama beseit der Berurim. Also Avraham Avinu mit Shama Beguf ist ein größer von Bittes der Chesed Lamela. Er hat das gehört und eingechasert. Der ganze Meimer hat nicht Teufels gewinnen. Das etliche Wörter hat ihm durchgenommen und hat das übergechasert. Kommen wir daheim, einmal ist gewinnen Seder, als er chassen, kommen daheim von Lubavitch, hat ihm gemacht für Makabas von ihm und hat ihm zusammen und mit sich zusammenklippen, übergefragt, was er gehört und gesehen. Hat ihn gefragt, wie soll der Kremer, öfter kennst du überchassen der Meimer? Sagt er, nein, nur etliche Wörter, was er dort eingechasert. Und hat übergesagt, die etliche Wörter, nachdem ist er wirklich Mischalei, Kedarkei. In Mark ist gewähnt Nachman der Kremer und Jesef der Kremer. Hat Yisrael der Kremer Machet gewähnt, reingehen zu Nachman der Kremer noch a Gemilas Chassadim. Hat die Geld nicht gedarft. Nur herrendig die Rebbe, die Meile von Gemilas Chassadim, hat gewollt mit Sake sein Chaver mit die Mitzvah von Gemilas Chassadim. Kumeke Nachman und Jesef die Kremers haben das sei euch getan und als ich pflege sich jeden Tag bargain eine bei der zweiten der Gemilas Chassadim just für die Mitzvah. Also wie so der Kramer ist wieder gekommen in Lubavitch. Ich sage, Samach Tzedek hat erst gegangen in Beis Medrash und gefragt einen von den Gebayim, ob ihr so der Kramer wer ist. Hat jener nicht gewusst zu entfernen, weil er ist nicht gewähnt von den Chassidim Biltim, er ist gewähnt von den Chassidim Biltim Versammlung. Hat er gefragt beim Chaim Bern, hat er ihn geantwortet, dass er so der Kramer von Polotzk. Hat der Rabbi des Samach Tzedek geheißen, er soll reingehen zu ihm, hat er bis Sol ihm eingegangen zum Samach Tzedek. Hat ihn der Rabbi gefragt, was ist seine Weide? Hat ihm geantwortet, also er steht auf jeden Fall in der Früh und sagt Tillen, trinkt Tee, hakt Holz und geht in Beis Medrash davenen. Nach dem Davenen lernt er Perek Mishnai, es geht er heim, Peis zu, geht in Mark, Leis Mincha, geht er zum Beis Medrash, Davenen Mincha, lernt in Yaakov, David Meidem, und geht er heim. Fragt weiter, das Samach Tzedek und Staka. Hat er gesagt, dass er ist aller Mann, hat ich kein Geld. Wie es war nicht, dass ihm ist geführt auf seine Snagus mit der Gnos Chassadim. Später hat gefragt der Meirash, der Samach Tzedek, lesen Kurv Yesser La'avi, wir gaben Darbi Yachad Itai b'Marinei, der Friedrich schreibt. Der Meirash hat gefragt Samach Tzedek, was hast du der Sende für ihn? Hat der Samach Tzedek geantwortet, als er hat Yisrael der Kramer gesehen, am Mud von Chesed Atzilus. Weil die Pasch, die jeder getan hat, das Chassadim von Avam Vinu. Da jeder kommen, ein Gast kommen zu Lubavitch, für Schwuss, beter wir haben die Gelegenheit, das Schuss zu hören, ein Perverter, ein Rauf von Eretz Yisrael, ein Rauf von der Chavot, ein Gochaski, zu bitte sagen mit uns ein Perverter. Ja.
Das ist die ständige Teure. So ich sag mir. Chaim, Chaim. I must say, first of all, like my fellows who spoke before me, I must say, Gerisi Ashikoyach for the Ma'arganim, for Rabbi Blooming. He was quite persistent in calling me and nudging and finding me, because usually it takes time a little to catch me, and he worked on it, and Baruch Hashem, I'm very happy that he was persistent, that I'm able to be here tonight. And also, I must say another thing, that the fact that it's Erev Yontif, and everyone's here together, mamish the night before Yontif, and we know what it means to prepare a house for Yontif and so on. So not only do I salute the Malamdim, but I salute their wives too, for allowing their husbands to be able to be by this special Hakhel event. And I would like to say one of the things, Ezeu Chacham Aloymin Mikol Adam B'chlal, and one of the things that the Rebbe writes in a mimer, it happens to be the mimer that the Rebbe set for us when we went on Shlichus. I went out on Shlichus in Tov Shalom et Ches to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe verbringt Purim Cotton. As it says Chim L'Sholem for us, we left the next day on Shushan Purim Cotton. The Rebbe spoke the Maimer V'Kibbalei Yehudim Tov Shalom et Ches. It's a Mugadik Maimer. You can see it in my Mordeh Malukit. And in the Maimer, when the Rebbe speaks V'Kibbalei Yehudim Asher Shechei Lasos, he talks about the Ikik Zayda of Haman, which was on Chinuch. Einani Shalech Yodit Chila Elabeila Tinoikis. And the Rebbe in the Maimer talks about that it's not only chinuch of Tashbar, but also medaf homesiris nefesh for chinuch atzmi. The eigene chinuch. Darf sich allein mechanech sein. And in this Maimer, he talks about the Mesiras Nefesh and Chinuch Atzmi. Ashgocha, this is what the Rebbe, part of the Maimer, was launching us off on the Shlichus, is that we should know that we have to have Mesiras Nefesh for Chinuch Atzmi. Which means, as we heard before, that if we want to be able to inspire Al Talmidim, we ourselves have to be inspired. If we want to give enthusiasm to our Talmidim, we also have to be enthused. So we have to look for the ways of how we can ourselves be inspired and enthused all the time. Especially that we live in a world that, especially in Oisik and Chinuch, in Hebrew they say a shochek. I've lost my English, you'll have to please, what's the word for that? It burns you out. Okay, we'll use that. It's not an easy task. I mean, I grew up in a house where my father and my mother, Aleim HaSholem, were Oisik and Chinuch, Ad Soif Yameim Kipshutai. They both passed away in the middle of a school year while they were working in Chinuch. They didn't come into school the next day because they passed away. Ad Kedei Kach. So I saw this mamish day in and day out in the house that I grew up in. So Chinuch Atzmi. So one of the ways how I work on myself for Chinuch Atzmi is that I try that the Rebbe should be one of my top Mechanchim. But he shouldn't just be a Mechanech once a week for me. But I try every day that he should be Mechanech me. And because of that, there's those that know, if I bring about it, I have a Kviyas every day that I read 5 letters of the Rebbe a day in Igros Kodesh, according to the Seder. I'm now in Chelik Chav Beis. When COVID came around, I added on reading the Rebbe's letters in English, because there's already a good number of volumes, and I started reading the Rebbe's in English, because if I already know the language, I might as well utilize it for the real reason why I have to know this language. And there's something very special about the Rebbe's letters in English, I must say. For those that their English language is their mother tongue, it's a different style of a letter, where the Rebbe writes and talks to people in those letters. I definitely warmly suggest to everybody a Kviyas and Igros on a daily basis is something that you turn the Rebbe in being your personal Mechanech. And I see also tremendous Hashgacha Pratis as I have this Kviyas. And today, in my 5 letters, it's a letter, Rosh Chodesh Sivan. And also, I don't go according to dates. I go just read. So it happens to be that now it fell out that I'm Sivan time. And it was a letter that the Rebbe wrote to all the Teda that was having their yearly convention, I guess, after Shavuos. And the Rebbe writes in the letter that that the convention is going to be, not convention, the dinner, whatever it is, the Ehrliche Unternehmung, I have to take a look at the exact Lashon. He says, so Zicher, everyone is still under the Hashpah and the Roshim of the Yontif of Shavuos. And he says, and of course, one of the central parts of Yontif Shavuos is the B'neinu Arevim Badeinu. And most certainly, that is what everyone's under the impression right now from that Roshim that it left them for Shavuos about this Nekuda B'neinu Arevim Badeinu. And the Rebbe goes on, Amidav sich stark in the B'neinu Arevim Badeinu and so on. It says, Hashgacha Pratis, as I know that tonight we're bringing a Hakhel Mechanchim, and the Rebbe talks about the central issue, central Nekuda of Shavuos is B'neinu Arevim Badeinu, and here we are, as we heard also very nicely put, that the B'neinu Arevim Badeinu means that we're the Arevim for the Arevim. Because the kids themselves, if we let them just do what they want, they won't accept so quickly the B'nai Arevim Badeinu. It's us here in the room that are making sure that they should be the Arevim for Klal Yisrael. So in Mela, it's quite appropriate that we're getting together Taka Erev Shavuos B'yoyim Shehigdimu Nasa L'Nishma as Achana to Matan Torah. Very, very appropriate. And just to show you also how the Rebbe, the approach to the Rebbe to Chinuch. My father, Olav Sholem, when he first got married, he was teaching in Detroit, in the Beis Yehuda Day School in Detroit. After that, we moved on to Toronto, where he taught. He came to Toronto to be a shliach in Lubavitch, and so he was involved in Lubavitch work, but his main parnosa was coming from teaching even then, and he taught in the Eitz Chaim Day Schools in Toronto. In Beis Yehuda Day School in Detroit, at that time, they were under tremendous financial strain, and they weren't able to pay salaries to the Malamdim. And it went about for 4 months that the Malamdim did not get a salary. And my father, we didn't have, my grandparents from both sides weren't wealthy individuals that they could support the family. So literally, they didn't have the money to live. And everyone in the city knew that the day school was under tremendous strain, and they weren't paying the Malamdim. So there was one of the children that my father taught, the family was in business. And the fellow, he loved my father, the father of my father's students. And he told my father, was darf sich mutschen? Why do you have to suffer? Not getting paid a salary. I want to offer you a job. I will put up the capital and open up a new business, and you'll run the business because I trust you, and I want to help you too. And we'll split the profits 50-50. It was a tremendous offer. Somebody coming up with the whole capital, opening up a new business, and he'll be able to run it and get 50-50 of the profits. So my father told him, I'll be going to the Rebbe. Maybe it was Yud Shvat time, going to the Rebbe, or maybe it is Kislev. I don't know the exact date, but of course it was in the middle of the school year already. And my father came to New York, and he went into Yechidus to the Rebbe. We're talking about something like Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, one of these years, Yud Beis or Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, one of them. And he went into Yechidus, and he told the Rebbe, he described the Rebbe the situation was going on, that he hasn't been paid salary for so many months. And he says, I have an offer. And he told the Rebbe the offer of this businessman to open up a business and to split the profits 50-50 without having to put in any capital. So he says the Rebbe heard the offer. And the Rebbe, as he heard the offer, he says the Rebbe went like this. Wasn't happy to hear the offer. Akrum Gitomit knows, we would say in our language. Everyone like this. So my father says to me, the Rebbe krumt macht tnua. I stayed for another 43 years in Chinuch. But it didn't finish then. The Rebbe turned to my father and he said to him, how much do they owe you? So how much do they owe me? They owe me 4 months' salary. So the Rebbe said, how much is that? So he calculated, and he said, be'erich, whatever it was, the 4 months' salary that he didn't get paid. So the Rebbe told him, when you go out of the room, I'm going to call right now Rabbi Chadikov, and he'll prepare you a check. It'll be a bridge loan, a gemach, that when they pay you for the salaries that they owe you, you'll pay me back. And sure enough, father went out of the room, the Rebbe's Zimmer, and he went to Rav Chadikov. Chadikov wrote him out a check, and it was able to keep him going until finally they kicked in and started paying him the money, the salaries that they owed him. So the Rebbe was quite clear. The shlichus of chinuch was so choshev, and to the extent that not only did the Rebbe show his nicht zufriedenkeit, not happy with living chinuch, but he also actually gave a personal loan to be able to keep him afloat, to be able to keep him going in chinuch, and he stayed in chinuch for another 43 years. This is just a small story of the thousands upon thousands of stories and also letters and sichos that the Rebbe has written and spoken about the chshivas of chinuch al taras hakodesh and everything what we're involved in when it comes to chinuch. Now, as it was mentioned before, I came in for Shavuos Chag HaMatzos. I remember as I became a Rov, it was in Tovshin at the end of the summer of Tovshin Mem Aleph, and Shavuos came around Tovshin Mem Beis, and I knew that the Rebbe had called Shavuos Chag HaMatzos, and I was hesitating. Does that mean I should come to New York for Shavuos or not? I'm a rookie. I just became a Rov. Wart a bissel, Pempik soll sich a bissel auswachsen. Take it easy. Don't get carried away with yourself. So I went to my mashpia, who was Reb Zusha Partizan, and I discussed with him the issue. I asked him. He was one of my Mechanchim, because chinuch never finishes. What do we say in camp? Learning never ends. So learning never ends also, that we should carry on, have our own chinuch and our own mashpia and our own belamdim and mechanchim. So I went to my mashpia, and I asked him, I said to him, what do you say about me coming to New York? Coming to the Rebbe, Chag HaMatzos. So he says to me, what's the shaila? So I tell him, ich bin erst geworden, I just became a rabbi. Till you start calling yourself a rabbi and coming to New York, don't get carried away. So he told me like this. He said to me, there's a chassid travels to the Rebbe. Chassidim have different dates when they travel to the Rebbe. When a chassid was Erfurt, a few Tis Kislev, another one comes always Simchas Torah, another one Rosh Hashanah. Everyone has their dates when they came to the Rebbe. He says, "Das soll a chassid for zum Rebbe." But there are times where the Rebbe wants to see you, not you going to him as a chassid. Bis geworden a Rov, he became a Rov. The Rebbe wants to see the Rabbanim on Shavuos. Was a Chag HaMatzos. It has nothing to do with who you are. As a chassid, it has to do, this is what he wants to see. He says that Lubavitch Shavuos is Chag HaMatzos. Wie können sei Chag HaMatzos if the matzos are going to stay home and be azab bittul from matzos? They have to come to Lubavitch. So you're not coming as a chassid to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is calling you to come. You have to come. I'm a hert hadroche word. That's it. Has nothing to do with who you are and what you are. So the chinuch I got, and Baruch Hashem, since Tovshim and Beis, except for the COVID year, I thank God I wasn't able to miss. I was here every year because I know Chag HaMatzos, the Rebbe will send Zayin Abonim. And I once heard Rav Chanzen Olavishol, who was a Rav in Petach Tikva, and he also had a tafkid that the Rebbe gave him a minui to be the Yoshev Rosh of Anholas Reshet O Yosef Yitzchak Lubavitch in Eretz Yisrael, of all our day schools, Moistes Chinuch. He came to New York Tovshin Chov Gimel, Tishrei Chov Gimel. And he was invited, first day of Sukkot, to the Frierdiker Rebbe's Sukkah, to be a guest at the Rebbe's Suda. He was invited, one of the guests. There was a number of people sitting at the table. I heard this Maisa from him. We were driving together to visit two schools in up north in Eretz Yisrael. And I was driving together with him, Zayin Tzlan Giyor, and also Ramir Freiman Oliver Sholem. He was the Mankal of the Reshet, the chairman of the CEO. And we verbringed as we were traveling. And Rav Chanzen told over to Maisa. He was sitting with his sukkah, first day of Sukkot, and there was another Eretz Yisrael Yid sitting at the sukkah also. And this other Eretz Yisrael Yid asked the Rebbe, what should we do about second day Yontif Sheni Shel Goliath? And the Rebbe said, no, se sitzt a Yid, a sitzt a Rov in Eretz Yisrael, those all are Paskin. There's a rabbi here, you should Paskin. So if Chanzen said to us, as we were driving, he says, I'm going to Paskin in front of the Rebbe. I just kept quiet. So then the Rebbe said it a second time. Start Rov Dov in Eretz Yisrael, so Paskin. He says, and I kept quiet. The Rebbe said it a third time. He says, when the Rebbe said it a third time, I realized that it's pushed the chutzpah if I'm not going to say something. So I said to the Rebbe, wir sind die Chassidim. Unser Kvies is the Rebbe. The Kvies unser. You know, keeping 1 day or 2 day depends on what your Kvies is. He says, Chassidim, unser Kvies is Rebbe. And he says, the Rebbe looked back at him and the Rebbe told him, aber ich hab dir gegeben, I gave you a task. Ich hab dir gegeben eine Arbeit. Soll sein, die Yoshev-Rosh von alle Bate-Sefer unsere in Eretz Yisrael. Reshet El Yosef Yitzchak. I gave you a tafkid to be the head of all the schools. He's telling us as we're driving. So I tell him, Kvod Harav, so what did you understand from that? I wanted to make sure, I want to hear exactly what he took from it. So he says to me, Ich habe verstanden. He says, I'm telling the Rebbe, unser Kvies ist der Rebbe, Chassidim. Ob du willst wissen, wo der Kvies für Rebbe von dir, I gave you a shlichus. And the shlichus is, at Zulstein, the unfair, that you should be running all the schools of Reshet El Yosef Yitzchak. Das ist dein Kvies. Dein shlichus is dein Kvies. This is something, as we're all here, that we have to realize. And Baruch Hashem, all of you here in the room are gebenched, that you have a shlichus. And the Rebbe, for each and every one of you, b'mokim shemachshavti shalom v'shomu nimtze. And if you're oisik in shlichus, in chinuch, that's the greste shlichus. I saw a letter in English recently. A fellow from Sydney, Australia. I think it's a letter in the mid-70s or something. He writes into the Rebbe, he was active, it looks like, with college youth. And he was successful. And he writes into the Rebbe that he's interested in, he would like to go full-time into a kollel and sit and learn. And he wants to hear what the Rebbe's opinion is. So the Rebbe tells him, there's no question about it, that we say every day in the morning, the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. So your desire to be able to Zetz Chavek learn a ganzen Tag in kollel, I mean, every day we say the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. However, the Rebbe writes, Klal Yisrael is divided into 3 chalokim. There's Yoshve Oil, that their main thing is sitting and learning. There's Bali Asokim, working people, that the ikir is mitzvahs with communal affairs. And then there's a third category, those that are oisik in chinuch. It's very interesting. B'derech kal, Yoshve Oil, Bali Asokim. The Rebbe says 3 categories. Yoshve Oil, Anshe Asokim, and Oiskim B'chinuch. And the Rebbe says, if you would come to me with the question what to do as you're beginning your life, which avenue to take, we could then discuss which avenue you could take. But you're already involved for a good couple of years in what you're doing, and you're seeing success in your work, and you're doing a job that not everyone can be doing. Hashgacha Pratis has dictated what your shlichus is. Of course, the Rebbe tries to tell him, possibly in your free time, and if you can, to find somebody in certain things that you're involved in, to have a substitute, but you have to make sure you're overseeing the substitute, to make sure that it's done properly, etc., etc. He tries to calm him down from his desire. But the word is that the Rebbe says, Klal Yisrael divides itself into 3 categories, and Hashgacha Pratis has dictated what your shlichus is. Everyone in this room, Baruch Hashem, is oisik in chinuch al taras hakodesh. Shlichus b'zdei chinuch. That the Rebbe gives personal loans for to be able to keep them in the business, as they say. And reading the letters, we talk always about Gula v'Mashiach. There's a letter from the Rebbe that he writes to a Neshei Chabad convention in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe says, there is nothing more that's mevatel the sibas agolus than those that are involved in chinuch al taras hakodesh, because it's mevatel the sibo mipnei chatoenu galinu ma'aretzeinu, the askus in chinuch al taras hakodesh. Nothing more that you can be involved in to be mevatel in yonei golus as those that are involved in chinuch al taras hakodesh, because you're mevatel mipnei chatoenu galinu ma'aretzeinu. In another letter, the Rebbe writes that we all know that Tomchei Tmimim, the Rebbe Rashab said, there's enough yeshivas out there. We're miyaseh the yeshiva that not only Amazol Zayin Stark Alein, that we should be strong eating ourselves, but to be able to have that responsibility to be a ner lahor, to give light, to illuminate wherever we go. And the Rebbe writes in a letter that there's no other tafkid that is a ner lahor on a constant basis, hours upon hours each day, like those that are oisik in chinuch al taras hakodesh, because they're sitting across from their talmidim and they're illuminating and enlightening them and being mechanech them hours upon hours every day. Even people that are oisik in shlichus in Chabad houses do not have that opportunity to be a ner lahor like those that are involved in chinuch al taras hakodesh. The hours of being a ner lahor, the Rebbe says, is when you're involved in chinuch is more than any other tafkid. And those are the ikar shastis from Tomchei Tmimim, a ner lahor. I said it before, I participate in different kinusim. But I must say, whenever I participate in kinus of Mechanchim, the atmosphere is a lot more of a chassidish atmosphere from the Amolige Zeit. And I'm always excited to see it because I know that means that all of our children and our grandchildren are in the hands of people that are interested in giving them a chassidish chinuch, a yirah shamayim dik chinuch. And your success is all of the success of Adas Chassidic Chabad, the next generation. And the kviyas of where the Rebbe is for us is in that shlichus. When I think back to the different Mechanchim that I had growing up and the impact that they made on my own personal life, there are certain things that come to my mind. One of the Mechanchim, one of the teachers that I had, one of my Rosh Yeshivas, I had the schus to be able to learn for a short amount of time, but a very qualitative time for me. I learned in Brunois, in the yeshiva. And the Rosh Yeshiva that I had was Rabbi Yosef Goldberg. And I had teachers before that, and I had teachers after that. Rosh Yeshivas, Magidi Shiurim. One of the things that stood out about Rabbi Yosef was that we used to have every day, he used to give us a pilpul shir every day for 2 hours. Every day. He really wanted to do it also on Shabbos. But we told him, take it easy. So we weren't kalim for it. But Erev Shabbos, 2 hours a day of pilpul shir. And that was the morning hours. He would come back into the zal in the afternoon, and he would walk from chavrusa to chavrusa. He wouldn't let us stand up. He would tell us to sit. And he would go from chavrusa to chazer over the nekudas atamtsis, a synopsis of the shir, and to make sure that we understood what the nekudas are of the shir. Every day. His smasris, his devotion and dedication to us as Talmidim. And then he completely floored me one day when he called me over and he said to me, I have an offer. I want to offer you something. I said, yeah. He says, what about from 5 to 7 in the morning, next to the yeshiva was a shtickle forest. He says, what about from 5 to 7, we'll learn b'chavrusa shav shmaitze together. I was 17 years old at the time. 5 to 7 in the morning, in the forest, shav shmaitze. I mean, today you might get into trouble for that. You got to be careful a little. But anyways, so he floored me. Here you're talking about a Shiva, a 70, whatever his age was at the time. He wasn't the spring chicken. And to turn to a Talmud and to say, let's sit together and learn Shav Shmaitze from 5 to 7 in the morning. Ich denar, yeah. I turned it down because I wasn't shaykh to 5 to 7 in the morning. I didn't see how I would be able to do it. So I didn't have the opportunity actually to learn in mamish private chavrusa. But the fact that he should even offer such a thing, and ask for such a thing, shows you how dedicated and devoted and the love that he had for Talmidim. It was something special. And because of that, whatever he said, and whatever he taught, and whatever he stood for, I was right there. Day in and day out. Kemayim aponim alponim, kein levodim lodim. I knew that he loved me, and I loved him back. I knew that he cared for me, and I cared right back for him. And his words were precious, every word. And his example and being the role model that he was stayed with me all my life after that. And I was a little spoiled after that, because I would go to other yeshivas and I would see the other Rosh Yeshivas. With all due respect, I did not see that kind of dedication and devotion and love like I saw by him. So I was a little spoiled. But it was a role model to stick with me, what it means, a real person that's involved in Vishinantim levanecha elu talmidecha. He was an example for that. At the same time, we were learning Chassidus with Reb Nissen. And he was teaching us Ranat during the weekdays and Kuntres Avoide on Shabbos, an hour before Mincha. And as we were learning Ranat, we learned the Maimer, where he talks about Yiras Ha'oinish and how it's Einit Toiv de Gdusha Klal, because it's Legarmi. Person fears punishment, he's thinking about himself. He's not serving Hashem, he's serving himself. But the Rebbe Rashab says to get yourself out of the mud, to keep yourself afloat, you can use Yiras Ha'oinish, Toiv de Noige, to keep you away from the Inyanim of Sur Mirah. And as we're learning it, and learning the Maimer, I was very, very caught. And just it took me like, I know I grew up in a place like Toronto, Canada, and I didn't only learn in Lubavitch or Moistis because we didn't have the time. A Lubavitch Cheder. Lubavitch Cheder folded when I finished grade 3. So we had to go to the other Moistis. And I knew how much Yiras Ha'oinish was, a main message in Yadas HaChareidis. And all of a sudden, this Maimer comes along and he says, Einit Toiv de Gdusha Klal, Toiv de Noige, and you could use it to be able to get you to save yourself, or don't stay in that level. That's only the first level. We're looking for upgrades afterwards. And it was just, I was starting to spoil that I knew how much Yadas HaChareidis is built on Yiras Ha'oinish and Schar Elam Hab, etc. And as I'm being all spoiled from the Gedank in front of my face, Reb Nissen bursts into tears and can't control himself, and he's crying away. I looked at him. I was sitting across from him. I looked at him and said, what's he crying about? I mean, it's a nice, it's a stimulating concept. The Yiras Ha'oinish is Legarmi, and it's not Toiv de Gdusha Klal. But then I realized he takes it serious what he's learning. It's not just an interesting concept. It's not just a interessante Gedank. This guy's living with what he's learning. Opa. That was another message in front of my face. And if you ask me, there's 2 shiurim that I remember from this that we learned. This is one of them. And then in Kuntres Avoide, when we were learning about Yiras Poigim Be'etzem HaNefesh, and it leaves scars. And it leaves scars. All of a sudden, Nissen bursts into tears. And also, he can't control himself for a couple of minutes. He couldn't stop crying. And I kind of looked at him and I said, what did this guy already see in his life? I mean, he was in the yeshiva most of the time, and even when he went to Paris in a car with his head down saying, Tanya Balpeh. Was hat Reb Nissen schon gesehen? We say that what he called, that what a 10-year-old kid sees walking down a block here in the United States, Reb Hill didn't see it for 80 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. And here he was bursting into tears, crying away about Yiras Poigim Be'etzem HaNefesh. Again, I said, Opa, this guy, he takes life serious. He's not just learning. He's living what he's learning. Those are the 2 things that I remember from his shiurim. Those 2 things were the major things that I remember. When I saw that he wasn't just learning, it was part of his Kehem Chayenu V'Orech Yameinu. It was his life. ernste Mensch. A Mechanech, we come across our kids, our students, our communities, they pick up how much remaining this mit emes, how much is it part of our lives, how much we really live with what we're talking about. That's why it's so important for us to keep on rejuvenating ourselves, learning ourselves, being mechanech ourselves all the time. That we shouldn't just be giving over concepts, knowledge. I remember once I was speaking to one of my chavedim, it's a manal of a moisid, and I asked him, "Nus, how many mechanchim do you have in your moisid?" And he said to me, "Well, we have 3-year-old, 4-year-old." He starts counting, and he says, "We got 11." So I told him, I didn't ask you how many malamdim you have. I asked you how many mechanchim do you have. So he looked at me, and he said to me, 2.5. That's what he said to me. I said, 2.5? Yeah, he said, okay, 3. So I said to him, okay, so that means we have to work as people that have achrayus, that malamdim should also be enthused and inspired, that they should upgrade themselves also to become mechanchim, not just malamdim. Meaning to say that we're not just giving over knowledge. We're not just teaching, but we're oisik in avodas Hashem, maleches Hashem, as we heard before. That we're just conduits of Dvar Hashem, and the more we work on ourselves personally, the more we have a chance that the Dvorim HaYotzim Lev Shenichnasim Alev. And then there's another thing that I picked up, another mechanech of mine. He taught me something else. I was on shlichus in Kfar Chabad in the yeshiva, Tov Shin Lamed Hey. And their Mendel Futafas would call over sometimes a bocher in the morning, chap a shmooze with a bocher. One morning he called me over. 7:38 in the morning, middle of Chassidus, chapsa shmuz. What does he tell me? Told me 3 things. First thing he tells me, he says to me, there's a bocher in the Zal that he's a Yosem. And he tells me the fellow's name. And he says to me, I know what it means to be a Yosem. He says, my name is Menachem Mendel, Ben Yer Menachem Mendel. I never knew my father. I was born into being a Yosem. And he says to me, the feeling of a Yasmus stays with me all of my life. This bocher, and he tells me the name, he needs to be befriended. I'd like you to make a kesher with him and to be a good friend of his. And he mentioned to me, as he said to me, his name is Menachem Mendel, or Menachem Mendel, he mentioned to me how old he was, or Mendel. He said to him, I am, and he said to me his age. I don't remember right now. You have to ask the family. It was in Tov Shalamed Hey, so they can tell you. I am, and he said to me the age, and a day doesn't pass by that I don't have the Hargosh of Yasmus. And as he said it, I was saying to myself, boy, you're Mendel, the Gibber, one of the running the underground in Russia, getting so many people out of Russia with false passports, sitting in jail, solitary confinement, the works, what he went through. The Gibber, the strong, courageous, starke chossid. And he's telling me that he has every day a feeling of yasmus. First of all, to speak so openly to me in such a way. That was the first thing he told me. Second thing he told me, he said to me, you know, when I was in jail, they put me in solitary confinement. I don't remember how many months. He said 6, 8 months. He says he was in solitary confinement in this little cell. He says to me, and they try to break you because, I mean, it's solitary confinement and you don't see the world and you're all by in its place. And it became sugar there. He says, I divided my day up into 3 parts. One part of the day, he said, I knew the first chelik of Tanya Balpeh, Kuta Morim. So I would be misboinin in the parokim of Tanya. And I would chazer ibr and be misboinin in parokim. He says, a third of the day, I daven barichas. I wasn't in any rush. Habe gedaven via mensch. And a third of the day, he says, I chazered over alle Verbringenischen that I was mishtatif in my life. And I pictured the Verbringens, where they sat, how they sat, who spoke, who said this, who said that. Anyone that knows when you were mishtatif in the Verbringen by Reb Mendel, he would describe the room. And also, he had the chosid and hinaher. He says, that's how I kept my sanity. He says, and the thing that kept my sanity was the Tanya Balpeh that I knew. Until finally I got some papers and I started to write down on the prokim to be able to learn from paper. But that's what kept my sanity. That was the second thing he said to me. He didn't even tell me his memela, zoals wissen zijn wie choshev this is, learn in Tanya Balpeh. He didn't tell that. He just told me this mice. And then he told me the third thing. Third thing he told me was that recently, he says, I went to a chasna here in Kfar Chabad in Beis Menachem. And I found there by the chasna a fellow that we learned together in Cheder from Russia 60 years ago. And we were so excited to see each other. We hadn't seen each other over 60 years. She says, we reminisced about everything about our lives when we were young and we're together and this and that. Später geworden communist. He left everything. Now he came to Eretz Yisrael recently. And he was describing to me his life. And he's finished describing to me his life. He finished with a big sigh. He sighed and he said, Orge lebt a Leben. I feel like ain't tog nicht an Noah got from Olam Hazeh. Lived a life. Not even one day did I have an Noah from Olam Hazeh. This is what the fellow says. Mendel says to me, when he said it, I had a flashback. Verbringen with the Gershon Ber Nevler. He says, Gershon Ber, he says, was a shuffle be'ene atzmi. He was big in Nigla and Chassidus and davening, but he was a shuffle be'ene atzmi. Very, very humble and very, of Zichalein, he was very harsh. And he said, he was Verbringen, and he said to us in the middle of Verbringen, Gershon Ber, was gornisht, nicht kein Nigla, nicht kein Chassidus, nicht kein Aveda. He says he was going on himself, like criticizing himself. All of a sudden, he says, his eyes lit up. He said, Gershon Ber was a mukha b'yisurim. Kids weren't well. His wife wasn't well. He was living in the slums in Neville. In the slums in Neville. So he says what he called. He says, Baruch Hashem, ich geogelebt a Leben und viel kein ein Tag nicht an Orgat von Olam Hazeh. He says, so Mendel tells me, here I'm sitting with a guy in Beis Menachem, and gibt mir so tiefe Krecht that he never had an Olam von Olam Hazeh. And here I'm remembering a Verbringen, wie sagt, Besimche, if there's one thing he has in life, he said, Baruch Hashem, he never had enough of Olam Hazeh. What did your Mendel tell me after he says this? He tells me, You know where such a thing can be coming from? Chassidus. That's what he tells me. Chassidus. I'm a hot Chassidus. Can ma upleben dem Leben in Olam Hazeh, and you take everything in the right proportions. This is the conversation that I had with him. 3 things. We finished the conversation. I went back to my seat. He had a personal conversation with me. It wasn't a shiur. It wasn't even a farbrengen. It was a personal conversation. And that personal conversation stayed with me till today because it was a personal conversation. We heard before from Rabbi Simpson, Avaya lekech chol loshen yochid, imi adiber medaber. Talk to me personally. He had a personal conversation with me. You talk about such a personal conversation. I was invited a number of years ago. There was a dinner for the Cheder Chabad of Toronto. And they were honoring posthumously my father, all of a show. There was a fellow, was a shtickle, vermögliche junger Mann, not kor greisig vir, but and he said to the Cheder, to the Hanhol of the Cheder, why do we have to find somebody that's frei, that will give $18,000 so that we should make him a guest of honor? I'll pay. This fellow is one of the Balchuvas. My father made him from. He says, I'll pay that the guest of honor should be Rabbi Glukowski, Olav Shalom. And let his son, Solange Yor, come to speak, put him in his shoes. So I came to the dinner. And as I came into the dinner, they sat me down at the head table, and Reb Yoin Shur tells me, the Manal Gashmi of the thing, he tells me, the guy that's sitting next to you is our biggest gevir. Chapa shmuz dem zayim karav. Okay. I look to my side. I see this is a balabos, a younger man. He's a man, mid-30s tops. I tell him, Shalom Aleichem. My name is Glukowski. Oh, he says to me, you're Rabbi Glukowski, Olav Shalom's son? I said to him, yeah. He says to me, oh, I'll tell you something about your father. I can't tell you Nisim and Floys about your father, but I'm going to tell you something. I was a Talmud of your father. Oh, I looked at him. I said, you learned in Eitz Chaim? He says to me, yeah. He says, I was a Talmud. I said, this is a fellow that one of the businesses that he has is 3,000 franchises of frozen yogurt stores in North America. One of the things that he has. He says to me, I have ADHD. I'm a hyperactive individual. As he was saying to me, 3,000 franchises of frozen yogurt. Verstatement, the hyperactivity is doing pretty good. And he says to me, as being a hyperactive child, a student, he says, most of the day I was in the hallway or in the playground. It was very, very hard for the teachers to handle me. He says, and I came to your father's class, I think he told me it was grade 7. So I walk into the class, first day, and I see a fellow that he used to have a red beard. Used to have a red beard. Maybe you could see a little trickle left. An older person. And he starts to teach. And I'm daydreaming, like usual. Daydreaming, fidgeting a little. He says, after a couple of days, one day your father tells me, Michol, I'd like you to stay by recess. I want to talk to you. Oh, he says, I was getting ready already. hebt sich an die Drosches, mit der Musse schmusen, mit the, you know, he says, and I stay in the classroom, we sit down together, and my father says to him, he tells him, I saw your last name. He says his last name. He says, I know a family like that. There's a big family in the Shar Shemaim Shul in Toronto. And he says, yeah, those are my. So he says to him, so David and Shimon and Yankiv, my father starts saying his names, they're your uncles? He says, yeah, those are my uncles. And my father says, oh, so if that's the case, he started talking to me about my family through the 15-minute recess. And the recess finished. No. Next day, he asks me again to stay. And the next day, again, he schmoozes with me. This time, he started schmoozing with me about what kind of sports do I like. And we had a schmooze about that. And your father told me he grew up in the United States. He was more in baseball. In Canada, it's hockey. And he had a schmooze with him about that. And he schmoozed with him a full week, one recess, about Dovaho. He says, by the end of the week, your father told me towards the last minute or two, he says to me, Michol, I noticed it's not easy for you to concentrate so much and to try your best. He says, I want to tell you something. It was my best year. I tried my best. I wasn't a 90 student and I wasn't an 80 student, but I was a 70 student that whole year. And I said, this fellow loves me. He's not just a teacher. So he tells me, that's what I can tell you about your father. And I said to him back, you don't have to tell me more. You said to me, you're not going to tell Nisim and Floyds. You yourself said to me that most of the year you were always in the hallway or in the playground. And you said it was your best year. And you were in your you got your 70s. And you tried your best. And you say it's because of how you felt towards my father. I said, that's enough. For chinuch, that's a very important message. We heard from Rabbi Blau before. There's expectations and there's expectations, he said. Your 70s, for the difficulties you were having then, was tremendous. And I'm happy that you told me that story. So here we are. Every one of us in the room, if we're asked as parents and also as teachers, what do we want from our students and from our children? There's a whole checklist. We'll give the checklist. Nigler, Chassidus, Yer Shamayim, Tznius, Midas Toives, Derech Eretz. Oh, we give a whole checklist. The question is always, how do you get to that? That's chinuch. What we want to get to, versteht sich, wir sind Chassidim. We know where we want to get to. But how do we get to it? How do we get to the hearts? How do we get to the hearts of all of our Talmidim to instill in them the chshivas and the chavivas of Teire mitzvahs, and Chassidish Anhoge, and Iskashras, and Rebbe, and Gula, and Mashiach, and all those things? That's chinuch. That's who we are as individuals, and that's how much we invest in ourselves also, and how much we invest also in the Ibergebenkeit, the dedication and devotion, and the Ernstkeit, and also taking that personal connection also to our Talmidim all together, and to constantly keeping mechanech ourselves. Soll der Eibishter helfen, that we should be zoiche. We're mamish erev matan Teire. And the B'nai Arev Badenu in our generation is very, very, it's a very, very challenging task in our generation. our children are exposed. There's no more walls. There's no more walls in our buildings. There's no more walls in our homes. Technology has made it that everything is transparent. And there's such outside influences that our children are exposed to, whether we like it or not. But ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevakesh lefi koiches shel adam. And es ist sicher, am hat die koiches. And sicher, as the Rebbe geht mit, and he gives us the koiches to be able to be successful. And he knows all the difficulties that we're going through, and he's with there all the time to be able to help us. So the Eibusher soll helfen, man soll matzliach sein in der Avodas HaKodesh, and man soll solche sein, die Kabbalas HaTorah besimcha bepnimius should be with the Torah Chadash shemiti teitze teikef umiyad mamish. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. No, L'chaim. Maybe guys could get collegos. Get a little closer. I think the mic is for the. I don't know. Okay, I'll keep you guys awake with the mic. There's enough for bison at least till tomorrow, at least. Okay. Okay, Chaver, L'chaim. One of the nekudas, when we talk about do you have maybe a stand for a table? Say there. Just to hold on to it is a. Seder? Yeah? Okay, one of the when we talk about Hakhel, we're talking about Hakhel. So one of the things it says about Hakhel is that it's reliving Har Sinai. It's creating an atmosphere, a maimed of millions of people, Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf, bedoimet Har Sinai. And once in every 7 years, it's to leave that kind of an impact. That you have such a maimed. In other words, we could say that there's two things about, Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he brings it from the Morgan Avram, in Hilchis Krishma, then when we say, Uvona v'chartem mikolam v'loshem v'keraftonim alkeinu shulcha godel, so he says, what do you mean, mechaven? And he says, Uvona v'chartem mikolam v'loshem, to be mechaven, to Matan Torah. Keraftonim alkeinu, maimed Har Sinai. Can you do it a shaila? The l'chayre maimed Har Sinai, Matan Torah, is hainu hach. Taken dayenu, we split it. But Boyfin Kaloli, Maimon Har Sinai and Matan Torah is part and parcel. And nevertheless, it says you have to remember both of them. Remember Matan Torah and remember Maimon Har Sinai. As we sit Erev Shavuos, it takes on much more. It's much more profound because we're talking about two nekudas. We're talking about Matan Torah and we're talking about the Maimon of Har Sinai. And I drawing from different things that the Rebbe said in different sichas, which I'll touch in a minute. I want to give an example where you have Matan Torah and also have Maimon Har Sinai in Chinuch. And this goes back. Ich habe gedacht when I was sitting Shiva for my father, Olav Shalom. So people would come in from all walks of life and all ages, which I didn't know, and I would ask them, when do you know my father? Were you a student? Were you a colleague as a teacher? Where'd you get to know him? And there was one fellow that walked in on the first day of the Shiva. And he said, I happened to be here in Toronto and I heard the news. I'm from Detroit. And I worked with your father in Detroit in Beis Yehuda Day School. He says, I want to tell you a story of what happened one time as I was substituting for your father. He tells me like this. Your father went into New York for Yud Shvat. He was teaching grade 3. And he asked me that I should substitute. So I substituted for him. And they were learning Parshas Vayetze. And I told one boy to say a posuk, and I told another boy to say a posuk. And it came to the last posuk, Parshas Vayetze. And I told one of the kids, you say the last posuk. And the whole class piped up. And they said, we don't say the last posuk in the parsha like that. So he said, I mean, why? What do you mean? He says, it's a siyum parsha. It's a siyum. So he says to the kids, so if it's a siyum, how do you say it? So he said, our Rebbe auctions off the schus to say the last posuk. And the next day, the person that bought the last posuk brings the money, and we go as a class to the bakery next door and to the supermarket, and we buy kibbud, refreshments, sudas mitzvah, and then he gets up in front of the class, he says the last posuk, and we have a suda. Chagiga. So this is grade 3. So I would never auction off. They insisted. They said that's how it's done. So he says, so I held the auction. I think he told me it was in Tovshin Yud Gimel, or Yud Gimel Yud Daled. I just remember Yud Gimel. He says to me, it went up to $1.77. Which was a lot of money in Tovshin Yud Gimel. He said, I still remember the two boys that were fighting to get this schus. He joked with me, and he said to me, those two guys are today manhigim in the Charedische Kehillah in Detroit, and they're still slugging it out. That's what he joked with me. He said, the next day the kid came in, the Talmud, with the money. He says, we went and we bought kibbud. There was also left over to give to tzedakah. And he said he got up in front of the class. He said the posuk. And there was a whole chagiga. A ganze yontif. He says, your father was sitting in New York by the Rebbe. but he had managed to instill in his Talmidim, Asiyim. Asiyim is not stam. Dach Ma'arash. By Maimid Har Sinai, there was koilus ubrokim. It wasn't just given cut and dry. It was not only a learning experience, it was a living experience. It was a ganze experience. It's like what's one of the things that captures a lot of times and brings that slocha to certain children when they're in camp. Because it's not just a learning experience, it's the ganze room. But even in our classrooms, even in our chinuch that we give, to enrich, to find ways of how to be mechaviv, how to turn things into much more of a chavaya, an experience not just of learning. Here, how many, when this fellow left the house after he was Menachem Ovel, I said to myself, how many parshas did my kids finish in Cheder that I never made any fuss about it? How many prokim in Mishnayos did they finish learning? No fuss. How many prokim in Gemara? Where was I as a parent to make a shturim, rash dikdusha? To think of how to enhance it in the emissaries. The Rebbe has two places where he talks about it often hate. One place he talks about it, the Sikh of Chobei Shvat, when he spoke to Neshei Chabad, and he speaks about there's dire betachtoinim, and there's dire no shemarchivin daite shalodem. And he says, the actual dire, the actual house or home that's built, that has its bricks, windows, doors, floors, roofs, etc. That's the basic, that's Torah u'mitzvahs. But the interior decoration in the house, the chen, the beauty in the house, when you walk in, the way the house is decorated, the furniture, the color schemes, all that, the pictures on the wall, etc., which turns it into a dir noah that's marchiv and adam shalot, dai shalot. The Rebbe says, in the dir b'tachtoinu with the Torah mitzvahs, he says, just like the interior decoration of a physical home is be'ikr in the hands of Nesheu B'nai Yisrael, Akeres Abayis, he says also the beauty of Torah mitzvahs, which expresses itself in chayes, enthusiasm, hislavus, simcha, joy, all that. He says that chelik of the chinuch in the house, the chayes, the chen, the slavas, the simcha, that's in the hands of the keres habayis, Nesheu B'nai Yisrael. There's the etzem dira, and then there's the chen of the dira. And the Rebbe brings it out in the Sikha also in Parshas Emer, when he talks about lahazer gedolim alaktanim. So the Rebbe says, l'chayda lahazer gedolim alaktanim should have been written already. It says a dibris. It's a basic tenet that you have to lahazer gedolim alaktanim. It's chinuch. So what does the Rebbe answer? He says, yesh loimer, that the basic chinuch of to say what's right and what's wrong, that we already know from Avraham Avinu. L'mayin savas bonav. What's the chinuch of lahazer gedolim alaktanim? The Rebbe says, lahazer miloshen zoyer v'or. That you're mechanech to lefnim mishur sadin, to hider mitzvah, to chayes and Torah mitzvahs. Not just what's right and what's wrong. Yes and no. Aber mit die ganze brille chayes. There's a word in there's the famous word with the Baal Shem Tov's word of boil a teva. We go into the tevas of Teda and Tefillah to Eratava from the Mabel, but the Baal Shem Tov adds on. It's not enough just boil a teva. It has to be tzoyer tassel a teva. The tevas have to be lichtig. They have to be enthused. They have to be fused with light, with enrichment, and so on. This is in chinuch to find the ways of how to turn things into much more of an experience, to enrich it. Finishing a parsha becomes a siyum at the chagiga. You know, I remember once, as a child, we were going Friday once to the mikveh. And outside of the mikveh, all of a sudden, a fellow comes out of the mikveh, a young guy, with a box of kalim. He came out, and it's a fellow that was a former Talmud of my father, but he didn't teach. My father taught Sion day school and also night school for the boys that went to public schools, and they came for 3 times a week in the evenings, and also on Sunday a little. This was a guy, was a Talmud from night school, and he had learned in night school till he reached the age of bar mitzvah. Usually they've got bar mitzvah in there. And he was walking out of the mikveh with kalim. You have to understand his background. And he sees my father sees him, shalom aleichem. They embraced. And he says to my father, I can't believe the hashgacha protest that we're meeting right now as I'm leaving the mikveh with the kalim. He says, you know, I just got married. I got married a week and a half ago. He says, and these are kalim that I bought for the house. And I brought them to Toivel. And he says, and I want to tell you what I'm doing here in this mikveh. He says, in grade 3 or 4 in night school, you taught us about tefillas kalim. And the school was in the same building where the mikveh is, the basement. He says, you took us down to the mikveh, and you took off your shoes and socks, rolled up your pants, and you took a keli, and you went into the water, and we stood around the mikveh, and you explained to us all about tefillas kalim. And you said to us how you have to make sure that there's no glue on it, and you have to clean it, and so on and so forth. And you showed us how you're toiveling the kli in the mikveh. He says, Bechlal, he says, the rabbi was standing in the water, and he's talking to us and tells us we're all standing around. He says, that day, I said, when I get married and I have my own kalim, I'm going to come and toivel the kalim too. And he came to the mikveh and toivel the kalim, and we made him outside of the mikveh. Hem is hashgacha protest to see. But the word was also, as I think back, I say to myself, does haste to turn, for heintige Zeiten, person buys a keli. There's probably a mikveh in the store. The kids don't even see tefillas kalim. They don't even see the experience, the mitzvah of tefillas kalim. They don't see it. Why are we robbing them of opportunities? In Moshel, baking matzahs. Baking matzahs should be just you walk into a store and you buy matzahs. Those say matzahs. Those say shmura matzah. Kids come to the bakery and they see the mishrayt, the maloif, the hin and the hair, and you speak about the 18 minutes and cleaning the tables. Seeing is believing. You turn it into a geschäft. You know, Palmy, there's parents, there's fathers that when the kids are having the bar mitzvah, they take their children to show how the sofer puts the parshas into the bottom. You should see. We let things pass by chaplap without giving it its proper respect and to dignify the things the mitzvahs that we're doing. We have to think of all kinds of ways. Weil the Welt, the Rash, the Klippe is there. The dazzle of the world there is. Why can't we have that same Rash the Kedusha when it comes to these things? We have to work on it. That's the koilus u'brakim of Matan Torah. My grandmother, Allah Shalom, she left in her tzavor, she had 5 daughters. She left in her tzavor that she's asking her daughters to be mishtadl, to try their best to light candles, at least Shabbos candles, 10 minutes before Lich Benchen. And that they should be mishtadl, that they should be wearing Big Day Shabbos when they do it. To be mechabed the mitzvah. And I used to watch her as a kid. After my Zayda passed away at a young age, she lived many, many years by us. Because my mother was the youngest. She helped with taking care of the kids. And I used to see her every Erev Shabbos. She would come to the table. I would watch from the couch. And I would see how she would light. And she would stand there, betchila rechime. And she would be mispal. And mispal. And mispal. With such a awe. And I every year by Ne'ilah, I always say to myself, no, halavai zol kennen a bissel davenen, the way my Bobbe would daven by the licht every year of Shabbos. She turned Hatlokas Nadis into something much more than just the actual lighting of the candle. She beautified the mitzvah. She glorified it. Afroi bakt challah. She takes off challah, froshes challah. Why shouldn't the children be around when she's taking off the challah? Why shouldn't it become a eis rotzen? Why shouldn't it become something to make it simis about? This is the kind of inyonim, and we talk about in chinuch also. It's the koilus u'brokim also. Achsidische Verbringen. Gedoyli shimush yoysim ilimuda. The whole Seder Achnos Sefer Torah. When you read the letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, he talks about it. Gedoyli shimush yoysim ilimuda. And the Rash with the Akofes, with the Taluche, with the whole books. Because it's not enough just cut and dry. We're talking about the koilus of brokem of Matan Torah, the chayes of Matan Torah, simcha Matan Torah. Memele, the tzoyer tasel teva, the lahazer g'doyel malaktanim, the chen of the dir. This is all part and parcel when we talk about chinuch. So this is part of we talk about, like I say, in order for us to be able to be matzliach, that the knowledge that we're implanting in our talmidim should not just remain as knowledge. It's when it's spiced up with a chayes, with a simcha, with a hislavas, with enthusiasm, with inspiration. It takes on a different dimension. It makes a greater impact and it stays there. I mean, that's why I always tell, when in Eretz Yisrael, when I first came to Eretz Yisrael years ago, there didn't exist camps. There wasn't camp in the summer. Because first of all, there's not a long summer. They finish around next to Tisha B'Av and then Rosh Chodesh El. But I can tell you that when they started making camps, and I was only for 2 weeks, I was from the first ones that sent my children, and I also encouraged everyone in our community to send, even though it was expensive. And I told them it's worth every day, just for the experience. The Yiddishkeit becomes also a living experience and not just a learning experience. That's one of the milas. L'moshel, take for example, sometimes parents, they ask me about sending their daughters to seminary. It costs so much money. And is it really worth it? And I tell them, every moment of sending them away to a good seminary is sehr wichtig. Because over there, it's not just that they're going to learn. They're going away, have a goylem koim teire. So it becomes a whole living experience. It's a completely different dimension. So in a kita, when we're teaching day in and day out, the Iker Dogish is on the learning. But we have to always try to find the ways to spice it up, to get that koilus brokim in there too. And we're not alone. We're not living on an island. We can't sich durchreden. Speak to Mechanchim that you see that are successful, that they have years of experience. Ask them what are the things that they're spicing it up with. How are they making it, how are they enriching things? We hear ideas, come up with more ideas. Because that's part of chinuch today. That's one thing. Then there's another thing also. This is a very important thing too. One of the things about Matan Torah, it says, the famous sikha that we always quote when we go out and speak in different places, the sikha of Kol Godel Lo Yosef, that there wasn't the echo. And the Rebbe says, what's the significance? And the Rebbe says, because there wasn't a rebound. One of the words you learn, even if you go to all the Torahs, permeated. The Kol of Matan Torah permeated into the stone. So there wasn't the rebound. No echo. And when you think about it for a minute, in the Kol Godel of Yosef, that there wasn't a rebound, has another message to it. The message that it has is, a lot of us can be very, very strong in Ben Odom Lamokim, in all the mitzvahs. Kashus, Tachlis Ahayde. We can be strong in our super duper tefillin. Ritzuas, black on both sides, not black on both sides. Avidish Yad, V'chulu v'chulu, this bottom, that bottom, tzitzis, we can go on, and the Hidurim, in Benodom Mokim. All of a sudden, sometimes, in Inyon Benodom Chavere, if we think somebody did something that wasn't right, a teacher, somebody in the community, we could sometimes, or a student, that we feel that the student's not acting right, the way we can express ourselves sometimes, not only is it not glatt kosher, but it doesn't even have a hechsher, like, of rabbanut, like we would say in Israel. The way we expressed ourselves. In other words, there's an echo when you get to the Ben Odom Chaveri. The Noichi Avar Lekecha is not permeating over there in the Ben Odom Chaveri. Our Shabbos tables can sometimes turn into a hospital room that we're making biopsies on people. We could all of a sudden talk about somebody in a not the right best way possible. A Rebbe could sometimes lose it. And the children are watching and they're saying, das heißt der Chassid. They're not verbalizing. They can't even verbalize it. They're not saying it because they don't know how to express it. But it's what's going on in their minds. Something's the matter with my teacher if he's exploded like that. And what happens is that once they see that there's an echo in one aspect, so if they see that there's certain things that are not congruent to the Anoicha V'Ailikecha, so they round other corners. That's in Banod L'Chavere, in respecting a Talmud, in being careful not to be Mavayish somebody Barabim. I had once a story, a 16-year-old girl, the parents came to me and they told me that she's slowly sliding away from everything. And she's completely not learning this year. She was a good student till this year, but she's out of it. And they started to talk to me about adolescence and the year 16, teenagers. So I said, if you tell her I'd like to talk to her, will she come? She said, yeah, she'll come. So I said tell her I want to talk to her. So she came, and we started to talk. And I, in the conversation as we were schmoozing, I directed it towards the fact that I heard that she's not having a good year in school, and she said to me, yeah. So I said to her, can you tell me what's the reason? What ticked it off? Do you know what made you all of a sudden because I understand till now you've been a good student. You've been learning well. What is it? Is it a friend? Is it this? Is it something else? I tell you can be open with me. I'm not going to, it stays in this room. So she tells me, I'll tell you what happens. She says, I'm chronically late. I don't have a built-in watch. I don't have a built-in clock in my system. If something starts at 8, I'm 8:10, 8:15. I'm not a time person. How much I try. It's just not. So she says I ended up one time, I got a ride to school and I ended up being early. And so I was in the class when it started. And the teacher, she takes attendance. She calls out the names. And she got to my name. She called out my name. And I said, I'm here. And the teacher looks up. And she says, let's give Chani a round of applause. She finally made it on time. And everyone started to laugh. And everyone was a round of applause. And she says, and I laughed too. I laughed outside. Inside, I said to myself, how could she do that to me? Embarrassing me like that in so public, making a laughing stock that everyone's applauding that I came. Such insensitivity. She tells me, and she says to me, I said, from this teacher, I don't want to hear a word. And she just closed herself off. This is what she tells me. So, as we're sitting in a classroom, and we're dealing with Talmidim and Talmidis, whatever, we have to remember, they're human beings. And we have to try to protect them, not to be mavayish. Even if we have to rebuke, it's got to be done in the right way. Sometimes one of our kids comes home, and he comes home with a note, Nishkin gewünscht a note, something that he did. What happens is, all the family has to hear it. Why? Why does all the family have to hear it? He came home with a note. You take the note, you read it, you want to talk to him about it. It doesn't have to be at a supper table, the whole note. We don't realize it becomes public consumption, and it hurts. So that's one kind of an echo. There's another kind of an echo. That's the echo of technology. That's the echo of literature in our homes. Books, newspapers, magazines, technology. That's also echoing. Someone sometimes, you can come to a house and you have to use a washroom. It's potter from a mezuzah. You can walk in sometimes to a Yiddish shtub, find a shtub, walk in. If you go to a bathroom, and in the bathroom you have literature that's in the bathroom, was passt nicht für a Yiddish shtub. It's not masim, not the teuchen, not the pictures. We're not from Tzimtzum Kipshuti. The bathroom, even though it doesn't have a mezuzah, it says Hashem Orasum Loye. It's not off limits. The Noichi Havai Lekecha permeates there too. Or technology. People ask me, what's the minig in Lubavitch where you light Hanukkah candles? By the window, or Pesach Beisim B'chutz, by the door? So I tell them, we're by the door, but there's a third place where everyone can light Hanukkah candles. I tell them, what's the third place? I said, about 15 years ago, I would tell people, if you have a computer in your house without a filter, you could put the Hanukkah candle next to the computer. Pesach Beisim B'chutz. Today, you don't have to do that even. Just put down the phone. If you don't have a filter, put down the phone, put down the menorah, you have Pesach Beisim B'chutz right there. So in other words, the Noichi Havai Lekecha is echoing. It's rebounding off technology. It's rebounding off literature. It's rebounding off sometimes the way we act, ben odom lechaveiroi. And our students watch the rebounds. And they pick it up. That if it could rebound off this and rebound off that, I'll rebound it off other things. Memela, that's for sure that we have to try our best to instill that the Anoichi Havai Lekecha cuts through and gets into everything. And if it's not there, toiges nicht. If there's a rebound, it has to be changed. And this is something that we have to work on in our own houses and also in all of our Talmidim around us. If a Talmud sees, here, closed? If a Talmud sees, when you want to take it, you'll take it. Okay. When a Talmud sees that we're not being congruent ourselves, Hatis Hashpah. We have to realize that too as Mechanchim. In our own homes, and also we have to speak to our students, and we have to also speak to the parents also, that they should realize what it's doing to their own children if they're seeing compromise, if they're seeing corners being rounded, what it does to them in their own chinuch. Because they begin to see that not everything that they're learning is taken seriously. And thus, that's a very dangerous message for such a thing. And then there's one more thing I would like to add on, and that is as Malamdim, how important it is that, one of the kelim that we have, tools that we have for chinuch, is Sipuri Chassidim, Sipuri Tzadikim. There's the famous vort from Rabbi Parcha. If he ever brings it down it's a Tzaddik would send Talmidim to be by Rabbi Parcha for a couple of years to get Hadrocha. And Rabbi had a Seder that for the first month when a new Talmud came, every Shabbos he would tell, by each Suda, he would tell a new story, L'Koved Enaya Talmud. And during the week, the first month of this new Talmud being there, the other Talmidim would sit with this new Talmud, and the roiv of the day, they would discuss the stories that Reb Hill told L'Koved the new Talmud, and they would analyze the stories and dissect it from all sides, these stories. And the stories that he told for a new Talmud even got a name, like, this is Yankel Baruch's first Maisa that we heard when he came. Second Maisa we heard it was named with that name. And they once asked Reb Hill, what's the pshat in his Seder on Hoge that a new Talmud comes and he puts such an emphasis on telling stories and how they analyze the stories and they take it apart and this. And Reb Hill said, Friedrich Eber writes in the letter, he said, in Teire steht Odom ki Yaakov mikem korban Lashem. The first two Svarim in Chumash are Breish Shmois. Be'ikir, it's Maisis. Kedei as a mensch soll sein an Odom. Wer ein Mensch, he should be able to become a mensch, so that ki Yaakov mikem, that he should be able to start being miskarav to the Eibishter, he has to know how to hear a Maisa, analyze a Maisa, and take a Maisa. And that was part of Reb Hill's adroche for every Talmud that came. One of the starke kelim that we have in our generation is we've been blessed with an abundance of Sipurei Chassidim, Sipurei Tzadikim. We have Sefer Toldos. We have all kinds of Elter Chassidim that came out with different Maises. We have stories from the Rebbe galore. Thank God. And when we sit there with our Talmidim, one of the kelim that we have to instill with them, emunah, betochen, Yerushalayim, and to do it in a pleasant manner, in a manner that they enjoy. A Maisa. We should have in our arsenal Maisas. And we should be telling Maisas. And if we have something that we're learning that we can match a Maisa up with, Adarabba. You see from the Friedrich Rebbe Sichas that he says when he used to learn with the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Rashab would give him examples from what they're learning from Elter Chassidim, Gefiert, Maisa Hin, Maisa Her. And you see from the Friedrich Rebbe Sichas, full with his letters also, how he's telling a Maisa to give an example to the thing, to show the inyanim. You see the chinuch of the Friedrich Rebbe when it comes to that, he's using darker Chassidus and Maises and Sipurim and Elter Chassidim and everything. Full. We're oisig in chinuch in our Talmidim, a Chassidische chinuch, a vada, Chassidische Maises. And today, Baruch Hashem, also the gewaltige Maises wegen dem Rebbe mit and Maises von Amol, Maises von Heint. And it instills in the children emunah, iskashus. The Rebbe is alive because you talk about him and you tell Maises. It's chelik of our chinuch. Mechanchim sein iskashus, mechanchim sein emunah zum Rebbe. B'chal emunahs von der aller Rebbe Seinu Nisienu. And this svarim, we don't have to. In our days, as I was growing up, the only thing that was printed was Talks and Tales. All of our Maises that we knew was Talks and Tales. And there was Sipurei Chassidim of Rav Zevin. My father, Olav Shalom, would always tell stories from Sipurei Chassidim from Rav Zevin. By the Shabbos Tish, for his Talmidim. When my father passed away, that was the sefer that I asked my mother that I want to take. Because I remember how he would sit Shabbos table. Not every mice he told Balpeh. He would open up the sefer. He would tick off before Shabbos mices that he felt that were more for our age. And he would sometimes tell the story reading it inside. That's how he told the story. Aber es hat sich eingebackt. Became part of our, what do you call it? And that's a starke kli in Chassidische Chinuch. I'll share with you guys a Maise, frische Maise, that I just heard. Last week we had a Chanukas Abayis of a mikveh in a place called Kfar Truman. It's across from the airport. It's a kfar that was established in 1949, and it was named after President Truman in his honor for the United States in supporting the establishment of in the UN of the state. So it's called Kfar Truman. It's not a frum place. There's a group of Balas Chuvas that live there. There's one couple that are very, very stark. The lady behind it, she was a driving force behind this, getting a mikveh built. It's a Freiplatz. And the mikveh was built Gimel Shitas. Sai Ashoke, Rebbe Rashab, Bor Tachten, Sai Ashoke Menatzad, Oitzeziriya. Lately, that's how they build mikvahs in Eretz. You saw a lot of mikvahs, Gimel Shitas. So it should be good for everybody. So there was a big Chanukah Bayis. Nice. It's a very nice mikveh. Well done. It took many years, but thank God it's finally done. And there was all types of people by the Chanukah Bayis. And there's an organization that builds mikvahs in Eretz Yisrael. It's called Merkaz HaTorah. There's 3-4 organizations in Eretz Yisrael that are really heavily involved in building mikvahs. Merkaz Taras HaMishpacha, Merkaz HaTorah, Taras HaBayis. There's a number of, and we work with all of them, because when we put mikvahs Chabad in a mikveh, it's like they're the ones that are really, or there's contractors that are building, and we join them for supervision, for adding on the Lubavitch board, etc. So at the end of the whole, the minister of religion was there. At the end of the whole Chanukah Abayis, everyone left, and the manal of Merkaz HaTorah, he's a ger younger man. He was there. He tells, I want to tell you a story. What's the story he tells? He says, a good couple of years ago, he says, there was this Balchuva bocher, American bocher, that came to my house on Erev Shabbos, and he came to clean my house. And I saw the bocher, hey, it's the bocher, fine bocher. I said, when are you coming cleaning houses? He says, my parents are very angry that I became frum. He's from Great Neck, very angry. And he says, and they estranged me. And they don't have anything to do, and they don't support me at all. They're against what I'm doing. So to be able to make a living and also to pay for the yeshiva, I clean houses on Fridays. That's how I make money. So the Cheverman tells me, he's Menal, the Ger Chosi says to me, I saw it was a fine bocher, Ernst bocher. He says, cleaning houses. I told him, come to my house, stop cleaning houses, I'll take care of you. And he adopted him, like a lone soldier. And he became his house. He took care of him. He says, after about 6 years that he's learning and everything, got to find him a shidduch. I was looking around. I found a nice family, very, very fine and Mädelnals. Ernst Bocher, a Masmid, Shinken gut lernen, Yer Shemaim. He says, and I read the shidduch. So the family says to me, they hear very good things about the boy, but they have one condition. He has to be born from Taras HaMishpacha. They want to know if he was born from Taras HaMishpacha. So he says, as far as I know, the parents are anti-religious. They disowned him, so to speak. He says, you know what, I'll call. I called up the rabbi in that area in Great Neck, asked him about the family, this, that, and he says to him, do you think it's possible that Taras HaMishpacha is kept over there? And everything? So no, it's a secular family that completely not interested in Yiddishkeit. Another one talk. Okay, so it comes back to the. And he says to the family, doesn't look like it. So he says, if that's the case, they're not interested. So he says to him, before you make your decisions, go or find a bocher. So they took him up on it, and they went to the Chaim Kanievsky, and he heard the whole story. And he said, you know what? V'yecher, go on it. Find a bocher, sebeseder. No, he said to go on it, so they went on. Became a chosen kala. Got to get married. They set up a date for a wedding. His parents, shumayfin, are not going to come to the wedding. So he says, I called up the parents. Ger Chosin says, I called up the parents to try to get them to come to the wedding. Ich bet. I said to him, why? He already chose his life. You see, so many years. What's so traumatic? What did Yiddishkeit do to you in the past that you should be so traumatic about it that you're not interested, ad kei kach, that you won't come to the wedding of your son? So she says, you want to know what Yiddishkeit did to me? She says, I was once by the Lubavitch Rebbe by dollars. And he told me to keep Taras and Mishpocha. And I went to the mikveh, and this boy is born from that. And look what I'm suffering from. Oh, he heard that. Went back to the family. I got great news. And when the bocher heard it, after they got married, their first son, Yikarsh Marisol Menachem, the name of the Rebbe, because he realized who he owes a lot to where he ended up. A Maise. The Shem Maise was zählt Balabatim. Aber jede Maise. And today, this forum that came out, to be able to tell stories. Because Achsidische Chinuch is also that we're mechazik the Emunah, his kashrus, meret v'ngerem. Because in our days, when we come into 770, we'd see the Rebbe. But today, how are the children going to be able to relate to the Rebbe in a very tangible way if the Mechanchim are talking about him? If the Mechanchim are enthused about the Rebbe, if the Mechanchim are completely safug with the Rebbe, that's how the children will be able to relate to the Rebbe. So we got to take him off the bookshelves and put him on the table and to talk about him. And when you talk about him, he becomes tangible. And then our children are able, our Talmidim are able to relate to him. And we have the achrayis. It's chelik of chinuch today. Chelik of chinuch. As azeh v'meret v'yiminu b'Hashem. Darf sagen, v'yiminu b'Hashem v'moish avdei. Darf reden. Darf halten in ein reden. And that's what makes him a part of our lives. And every new story, kemoitze sholrov, a meise van amol, a meise van heint. It's a medav dat zeln meises van heint. I saw recently there was a whole a vikuach, meises van heint, en her. Aber warte doch mit so meises von heint. Was it do meises? Warum is that bemuchish? It's like I say, I always joke around. I say, it just depends how you want to market it. Die will sagen, do me so chayve kaim, do me so chayve kaim. Die will sagen, yatem b'cheyo, so yatem b'cheyo. But the bottom line is that the Rebbe is with us. That's the bottom line. And when you see a mice, you hear a mice, and you see in Yonim, when we said b'muchish, kipshutai, So, I read my 5 letters in a day. I'm on the plane, reading my 5 letters. One of the letters, the Rebbe says about you're making a Nesiya now, Nesiya L'Tfutzes, Sicher, wirst du im Chazak sein, wo du gehst, and you'll let me know what's going on. Wherever you go, what happened. Nesiya L'Tfutzes. On the plane, before the plane takes off. Nesiya L'Tfutzes. So I should leave it in my pocket? Shouldn't talk about it, shouldn't mention it. Why? Verkehrt. For, ich habe Kviyas. And anyone that knows, if you take a look at the time in Menhagim, he brings down a noitel eitzim in a Torah. There's 2 ways how you noitel eitzim in a Torah. One of them it says, in the shiurim kvuim that you learn. A noitel eitzim in a Torah. Is that this bemuchish b'merem, verbrengens? This Rambam yoimi, this Chumash yoimi, the Tillim yoimi, and when I let mit dem, das ist heint. Und das goche protische bedover. Und der Kviyas ist dafka azoi und nicht anders. Und man lernt von der Kviyas. Is a Mensch hat a Kviyas, was lernt? Sicher. Zet men bemuchish das goche protische in die Kviyas, was man hat. And these are things that we should be sharing to our Talmidim. Because that's part and parcel of the chinuch that we have to be giving. As chassidische malamdim. No, I'm saying l'chaim. It says, Leil Shavuos, you stay up a whole night. The night before, das steht nicht. Ich meine, steht der Chazander von so einem Tick und zweite Nacht. Euch, aber fahr darauf. Jetzt darf Magdim sein Nasel und nicht mehr. Darf tun. Chaim.